Hello, welcome to yet another episode of Teqnews presented by Teqstories. We are talking about Kubernetes today. There have been a big major announcement recently that says Kubernetes is dropping the support for Docker. In the next few minutes, we shall understand what that means and how that affects a DevOps professional. The change that Kubernetes has actually brought into picture is basically for the benefit of this entire process of containerization clusterized environment. So far, the Kubernetes cluster had been running Docker engines on the nodes to do the containerization act. But Docker, by its nature, does not only provide you just the container runtime engine, but also provides the Docker network, the Docker volumes, etc. Now those components, the network and the volume, are not practically useful to Kubernetes because Kubernetes anyway shall use its own networking or volume operations. Therefore, it makes complete sense to just allow the Docker runtime environment on those nodes and dropping all the other practically useless components. And that's exactly what Kubernetes has done. In the newest version of Kubernetes, that is version 1.20, this change has been implemented. The runtime environment that Docker uses, it also has a standalone version with the name Containerd. This Containerd runtime is now the replacement of running the full Docker setup within the Kubernetes cluster. All this time that Kubernetes had been into the market, it was using the Containerd as a part of the Docker environment and not as a standalone edition. Going forward also, it shall be using Containerd itself, dropping all the other useless Docker components which it was not using anyway. This move is going to contribute in making containerization even more lightweight. So now let's have a look at how this change actually affects a DevOps professional. If you are working in the sector where you are maintaining the pipeline, then none at all, because all your existing pipelines will continue to work exactly the same way it had been doing so far. So the pipeline management does not go through any changes at all. In the pipelines, we usually use Docker for building the Docker images and pushing them to Docker Hub. Kubernetes requires to pull those images from the Docker Hub and run them inside containers. So the only part Kubernetes really requires is the runtime engine, and that's what Containerd is. Docker is already a part of the OCI or the Open Container Initiative, just like the other containerization technologies. So if you happen to use some other containerization technology apart from Docker, it is still going to be Containerd compatible. But let's say if you are working in Kubernetes administering, you are working in setting up Kubernetes clusters from scratch. And let's say if you are not using any kube automation tool like kubectl, kops, or any cloud implementation like Azure Kubernetes or AWS EKS or Google Kubernetes, then you shall require to download the standalone version of Containerd on the node machines and install them, instead of configuring with the complete Docker engine as probably you had been doing so far. However, if we really take a look at how the industry is shaped right now, well, most of you must be working on any one of the cloud implementations like Amazon EKS or GCP Kubernetes, etc. There are a very few projects running in today's date that require you to do a scratch installation from the binaries for Kubernetes. But what if you still do not want to agree with the changes that Kubernetes is bringing into picture? Well, you still have a way out. Then all you need to do is to make sure you do not upgrade to version 1.20, which is the latest version and where they have brought this change into picture. Well then, nothing has really changed from the ops perspective we can see. There is absolutely nothing to worry about this change at all. Your existing deployment pipeline is not going to suffer, neither are your cloud implementations. We also spoke about that you can stick to a lesser version compared to 1.20 if you want to stick to your older process of implementation. But however, that is not exactly a very recommended way, because obviously as the things keep on going forward, slowly Kubernetes will stop this backward compatibility and they will completely stop support for this existing complete Docker thing. So let's consider this change in an optimistic way and let's see what's coming forward into the picture, and we're gonna surely embrace it and hope to see further enhancement on making these things even more lighter weight and further better.